This is a crossroads of civilization, and there will be a determination of which side of those crossroads we wind up finding ourselves on. And I just want to set the stage for what our conversation is going to be like with the following context. Two things can be true at the same time. Number one is anti-Semitism is at a record high right now across the West, including the United States of America. Today it is safer, and I've done this repeatedly since October 7th, for me to walk the streets of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, than to go speak at a lecture at Columbia University. Think about that for just one moment. At the same time, at the RNC last week in Wisconsin, that was likely the single most pro-Israel, philo-Semitic, which in English means pro-Jewish, event that I've ever attended in my life, that I believe has also been ever hosted by any mainstream organization in the United States of America. Amongst the countless speakers Wednesday evening celebrating the introduction of J.D. Vance to the American people, there was a meaningful focus on the parents of hostages, a hero that we're about to hear from in a moment, who survived the lion's den like Daniel in Harvard University, Lee Zeldin, Matt Brooks, and so many others. But I don't want to speak about that. I want to frame this as the true heroes of America, the frat boys from North Carolina. And that's what I want our panel to discuss. This is not a Jewish issue. This is not a Israel issue. This is not a Zionist issue. This is an American issue. And what those frat boys at North Carolina demonstrated that none of the presidents of Harvard, MIT, Penn, and so many others can ever understand is that you have American values or you have Hamas values, but you can't have both of them. Yeah. And that's what I hope that we're going to cover in this short period of time, and I'm grateful for all of your time with us today to make this an American issue and indeed not a Jewish issue. Let's start with you, let's actually start with you, Shabbos. You're closer and have the best hair.
Wow. I'm going to tell my mom you said that.
Can you tell us what it's been like to be on the Harvard campus for this past year?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say my real claim to fame is the North Carolina frat boys asked if I wanted to go drinking with them after the convention. So that's pretty cool. So, I mean, how much time you got? The past year, let me actually backtrack for a second. If you would have told me that I'd be speaking at the Republican convention, I would have said, yeah, as a protester, someone who infiltrated. But the last year has been so remarkable in a very negative way in terms of those who I thought were my ideological allies, those who I thought were my friends, those who I thought were my intellectual role models, have not only abandoned the Jewish people, but as you quite rightly pointed out, have abandoned the American people. So I could give you a laundry list of things that happened. I could tell you all about how a Jewish student at Harvard was spat on. I could tell you how a staff member challenged me to debate him as to whether Jews were behind 9/11 and then taunted me with a machete. I could talk about the private armed security I had outside my house for a week. I could talk about the Israeli student who was asked to leave class because her nationality made students uncomfortable. I could literally give you a laundry list for 20 minutes of things that if I didn't experience it personally, I would have said there's no way that it happened. But the much more fundamental problem is Harvard purports to train the next generation of American leaders, thought leaders, religious leaders, presidents, prime ministers, and they're actually right. Statistically speaking, it is not absurd to say that I sat in a class with a future president. If these are the classmates, if these are the students who will be America's future leaders, I can assure you we are in serious, serious danger. They are not just ripping the Israeli flags. They are not just tearing down the hostage posters. Of course, they are doing all those things. But they're also ripping down the American flags that I planted in partnership with YAF, Governor Scott Walker's organization. They ripped all that down as well. They are anti-American. They are anti-West. They are anti-capitalist. They've made those points very, very clear. And those anti-Israel protesters you were describing yesterday outside of Prime Minister Netanyahu's address, that was co-sponsored by a group of Harvard students who were at these rallies and vandalized monuments and said Hamas is coming. So it's very, very scary. And I have the easy job. I just get to complain, which I've been doing most of my life because I'm Jewish and it works really well. But don't tell the anti-Semites at Harvard I said that. They'll use that as good. But you guys, it's true. But you guys have the difficult job, but the important job of actually doing something about it, passing legislation and creating solutions to these problems. So I've spoken probably too long, but it's bad, and we need your help.
Shabbos deserves an enormous round of applause.
Oh,
and
thank you.
partially because he sees the time and he spoke very quickly, but not because of that. I'll tell you what happens when you're on a college campus. It's easier to mind your business and to stay silent. I've got a job that I want to get. I have a place that I want to apply. I want to be part of my same social circle that I was. I'm positive from our conversations, none of those social circles are with you anymore. It takes guts and it takes fortitude, and at a young age, it really is something inspiring for us to see. You're in a room of leaders, but I think we can all look to you for that as an example. Thank you, Shabbos.
Thank you very much.
Representative Fine, I know that you've proposed a legislation to be contemplated to come out of ALEC. I know that you've succeeded in passing it in Florida. I know that you've come up with some additions to make it better. Would you spend a couple minutes and tell us about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And look, it's an honor to be here. I actually was Shabbos 30 years ago. I went to Harvard. I was one of those future leaders. I guess they didn't do a very good job. So, and the ironic thing is I have two sons, two Jewish boys who are 16 and 12. I spent my entire life trying to get them set up to be able to apply to Harvard, where I went. Now I don't know that I want them to go to college at all. So I want to tell you a quick story about my visit to Israel with my two sons just a couple weeks ago, and then we'll talk about that bill. The story I want you to know is not something remarkable. It's not about my meetings at the Knesset. It's not about all the people I saw. It's not even about meeting with the soldiers or cooking with them. It was when I took my boys on the last day to the Western Wall, and we went through security to get to the Western Wall. And as we walked through security, the security guard, the guy who was wanding us to make sure we didn't have anything bad, talked to us. And he said, "My best friend died on October 7th. Now, there weren't a lot of Americans there. He didn't get a lot of people to talk to. There's not a lot of tourism in Israel. So my best friend died on October 7th. And can you explain to me why Americans hate Israel?" That is what they are being told, and that is what they're hearing over there. That is part of the evil that we get from the mainstream media today. Now, I know that in this room, people do not feel that way. And that is why today here at ALEC, we have an opportunity to show that. In Florida in 2019, we passed model legislation because we saw anti-Semitism on the rise. And what I always got told, I'm the only Republican Jew in the Florida legislature, and what I always got told was the same people who thought misreferencing someone's pronouns was violence never had a problem when it came to talking bad of the Jews. They would just say, well, it's just the Jews. And I said, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I think what we'll do is this. We're not going to discriminate in how we deal with discrimination. So in 2019, we passed a law where we did two things. We defined what anti-Semitism was, and we said, we're not going to tell you in our educational institutions how to deal with it. We're just going to tell you one thing. However you deal with racism, that is exactly how you will deal with anti-Semitism. And so when you look around the country and you see what we have seen in the last year, thank you. When you look around the country and you see what we have seen at universities in Massachusetts and New York and California, you know where you don't see those kinds of things going on? You don't see those kinds of things going on in Florida. And it is because in Florida, we have advanced these bills, we take them seriously, and we pass them. And so today and tomorrow, those of you who sit on a couple of task forces here are going to have the opportunity for us to say, as the conservative movement, to stand with the people of Israel, but more importantly, to stand with the people of America in saying, in this country, we aren't going to put up with this stuff. And so I look forward to talking with all of you about that this afternoon and tomorrow.
Thank you, Randy. All right, Senator King, you get to go next, not just because you got the nicest footwear on the stage, but I've had the privilege of going to Israel with Senator King, I think, 4 times now already, and have been incredibly in awe of how he's carried legislation, not just in Texas, but advocated for it across ALEC, which is such a great organization, on a whole slew of things, but the ones that speak closest to my heart, the U.S.-Israel relationship. Senator King, can you tell us, A, how you got into this and sort of how you see what the future portends?
Sure. And while I'm here, let me put a plug in, and he didn't ask me to do this, but Aryeh's got a great book, came out last year. It's called Let My People Know, spinoff of Let My People Go. You can download the audio on Amazon while you're sitting here. I'm telling you, it's a fun book. It's a great one to listen to on the plane, and it tells a sad but comical story of what it was like being the senior advisor to David Friedman when he was Trump's ambassador to Israel, going through what they had to deal with the State Department on everything, but particularly opening up the embassy. And then Aryeh was really one of 2 people, the lead people, he and Jared Kushner, on negotiating those Abraham Accord agreements. And so you get that story. It's got a lot of good comedy in it. It's a fun book, and you really ought to download it before you get on your plane tomorrow.
10% of the proceeds to
I'll
ALEC.
take it.
Here we go.
You know,
Okay.
Just the Phil King re-election campaign. That'll be fine.
Sold. Okay.
That'll do it. So, we were talking a little bit earlier about, what to talk about. And I think there's kind of a package that each state needs to look at for what type of legislation they need that would help combat anti-Semitism and also help support Israel. And I think there's really 3 bills. I think the most important one right now is adopting the IHRA definition, IHRA definition, international definition for anti-Semitism. And it has in it, and which is what Florida did, and which will be up before the task force today. And what it does is it not only defines anti-Semitism, but it also has examples. And you need to put those examples into your state code as well. And that directs all your agencies and schools and everyone to follow that when they run into this. I will tell you from Texas experience, don't just put it in the government code. We have to go back next year and put it in the pub ed code and the higher education code, because schools, kind of being what they are sometimes, don't always pay attention to something unless it's really in their law book. So we're going to have to go back and fix that. But the IHRA, the international definition, is number 1 right now. The other one is something that's been around for about over a decade ago. There was this, anti-Israel groups figured out that they could not defeat Israel militarily, so they said, well, let's go after them economically. And Israel's a very small nation. They have very, very few resources. All they really have is their people and their brains. And so for nations and states and communities and countries to economically boycott, it's called boycott, divestment, and sanction, to economically boycott Israeli products and their services was a huge, huge problem. And so a number of states now, I think South Carolina was the first, Texas was second, and others have done it now, have passed anti-BDS legislation. And what that says is that your state will not do business with any company that boycotts Israel, and your state will not invest any of its funds, retirement funds, general account assets, whatever it may be, in any fund or any bank that boycotts Israel. And let me tell you, when you take $400 or $500 billion out of the anti-Israel market, all of a sudden companies like, or organizations like BlackRock and others show up at your capital and say, how do we correct this? So the anti-BDS bill is very, very important. There's some great examples out there. The anti-Semitism bill, very, very important. I think one other thing that's really easy to do is to create, and I was surprised at how effective it's been, but was to create a Holocaust and anti-Semitism commission. Doesn't cost a lot of money. You'll have volunteers for those positions. But we did that 2 years ago, and they have done a magnificent job of not only creating educational tools for the community, for colleges and universities and schools and others on anti-Semitism, on how to recognize it, but also letting us know where it was occurring. And a great example was they came to us out of the blue last year and said, hey, we're seeing this rise. This is before anything happened on October 7th. We're seeing this rise where we're beginning to see some academic boycotts against Israel and Jewish studies in our universities. So they brought us a bill. We passed a bill that simply says you can't prohibit international studies with Israel. You can't prohibit exchange students with Israel. And you can't prohibit Jewish studies on campuses. We had no idea how important that was going to be just 6 months later. So that's an easy thing to do. Holocaust, Anti-Semitism Commission, Anti-BDS bill, the IHRA definition, and then just any resolutions you can pass every time you're in session, just saying we recognize Israel's right to exist and its right to defend itself at all times, and that you stand by Israel economically, militarily, and in any way you can.
Thank you, Senator King. Shabbos, just pointed question. We're going to go round robin and quick. Can Harvard or the other Ivy League schools be saved?
So For those who don't know, we filed a lawsuit against Harvard because they are either unable or at this point clearly unwilling to do anything to combat anti-Semitism and protect Jewish students. And the reason I know that is because if they wanted to take the issue seriously, they literally would have done it already. We are now 9 months after October 7th, and they have not implemented a single policy position that would change anything about the university, anything about the anti-Semitic professors who teach and indoctrinate their students, nothing about the foreign students who violate American laws in order to harass Jewish classmates, nothing. So I think the only way that Harvard will ever change is if there is sustained public pressure and sustained political pressure, using the power of the state legislator, using the power of media and social media. We have big donors like Bill Ackman who have refused to give Harvard and all these other Ivy League universities a single penny. And by the way, I know we're talking more with state legislators, but we're working with the United States Congress and specifically Congressman Jason Smith of the House Ways and Means Committee of why in the hell should the United States taxpayer be giving Harvard and all these other Ivy Leagues billions of dollars every single year just for them to harass and attack Jewish classmates? That should be...
I think, by the way, you could have stopped. Why are we giving them billions of dollars?
Right, why are we giving them money at all?
Yeah. This crowd regardless,
their endowment is $50
correct.
billion. So the answer is yes, Harvard can be changed, but not because of their own self-will, because of people to my left.
Randy, thank you, Shabbos. Randy, in the time that you went to Israel, because I think this is critical, you saw that the hotels are half empty. You saw that obviously the business flow is less than it was. Some word of encouragement in terms of how states can interact with Israel from a commerce or a tourism perspective in its time of need.
Well, I think now's the best time to go. I will tell you, I felt safer there than I would in any blue city in America right now. And no, it's the truth. I mean, I let my 16-year-old and my 12-year-old walk through Jerusalem by themselves, something I would not let them do in New York. They wanted to go out to dinner, and I let them do that by themselves. It's a great time to go. I'll give you this advice. You get private Israel, basically, to yourself. These things that are normally incredibly busy and incredibly lots of lines to go to, Christian tourism is zero. I mean, it's gone. Many Jews are still going to Israel because they want to support it. And so I would encourage you to take delegations now. Hotels are less expensive, and go yourself, because you'll never have a better time to go now. But I did want to add one thing, Shabbos, as an alum of Harvard. The biggest problem that Harvard has, it's the people in charge. It's not even the president of the university. It's the people who are on the boards of these universities. And the problem is they're wealthy and they don't care. And so none of these universities are going to fix themselves until the people who sit on the board of trustees are replaced. And I'm hoping Bill Ackman and folks like you, for example, at Harvard, will pull forward a slate of people that we alums can support next year. We don't do that, nothing's ever going to change.
Senator King, in the waning seconds that we have, you've done enormous work to create the Texas-Israel-specific branch. Can you sort of advertise what that looks like? Because I think states should be able to adopt that.
Well, I'll just say this, that Israel's one of Texas's largest trading partners. And we've taken delegations there, business groups go there. We've got some of the Texas folks that just went there in the last few weeks. There's nothing that builds those economic bridges better. And I'm telling you, they're the startup capital nation. If you want to find a good place to do business with, go make some friends in Israel.
I agree with that 100%. I would tell you, as an investor in Israeli businesses, they're looking for red states to go to. Instinctively, they go to California. They would love to be able to go to any of your states and succeed there. So if you go chase them, they will know to go. I just want to wrap up, by saying thank you to Alex, saying thank you to Cam, saying thank you to Lisa. I want to just leave you with two things to think about very briefly. If you look at every pro-Hamas protest that has occurred since October 7th, again, protesting already on October 7th in favor of the rapist and the baby beheadings. If there was an American flag, that flag was burnt, that flag was shredded, that flag was tread upon. If you look at any of the pro-Israel rallies, I've never seen so many American flags. The Venn diagram in between those who support Hamas and hate America is not 99%, it is 100%. Yeah. And I'll leave you with what I'm going to share at Kufi this upcoming week. For those who are believers, I love ALEC. You start with a prayer. So we're going to end with one. 3,340 years ago, plus 4 months, the Jewish people left Egypt. That began a trend. Every single country that has treated the Jewish people as less than equal has an undefeated record of being defeated. The promise of the United States of America, and I say this as a Jew who's been here since 1881, There has never been a greater country for the history of the Jewish people, and therefore I believe to a great degree there's never been a greater country in the history of the world. This is not a Jewish issue. My people will figure it out. This is not an Israel issue. I promise you they will figure it out. From the depths of my heart, this is an American issue. And the people of ALEC, we need you to figure it out, not for me and not for my co-religionists, but for the future of the United States of America. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.